February 10th, 1676. There's a war raging in the New World. This war is one being waged on the basis of autonomy, because this war was King Philip's War, also known as the First Indian War. And it was the last effort of the Native Americans to push back on English authority and rule. And like many other wars, this one would spread to those who were just trying to live their lives with no dog in the fight, so to speak. And today, a woman would be kidnapped and held for ransom because of this very war. This is the In History Show on the Semper Reformanda podcast. I'm your host, Cody Bockelkamp. The woman kidnapped was Mary Rollinson. She was born 1637 in Somerset in the United Kingdom. And she, like many others, saw great promise in the New World. And so she left the only place she had ever known to settle in Salem. It was there that she married a reverend and they settled down, having 4 kids, one of which unfortunately dying very young. But this seemingly normal life would not stay quiet for long, because this story is not one of a peaceful, quiet life, but rather of the marks of sin upon all it resides in. The presence of the English, Spanish, and all who were traveling over to the New World brought tension. Tension because it was only new to those arriving. This land was not empty. As is the case anytime this happens, the tension of a land grab and fight, paired with the sinful nature wrought upon all humanity, it breeds violence, hatred, and war. And so, King Philip's War began. Both sides firmly believing in their rights and actions. And this war would eventually come upon the doorstep of this ordinary couple. And when it did, Mary, her husband, and her 3 children were taken and held hostage. She would then, subsequently, write the details of this moment and her captivity. Her autobiography, as it were, had a strange title for anyone knowing the contents that lied within. It was titled, "The Sovereignty and Goodness of God." And were you to read it yourself, be warned. This is not a theological treatise written by a perfect person, but rather an account like all other human accounts, one filled with good and bad, truths and errors. It is, for all intents and purposes, a faithful human account of one marred by sin. From one side of the picture, from the sights Mary would witness, she would seem to be correct in her assessment in referring to those who raided her house and killed many and took her captive as, quote, ravenous beasts and, quote, barbarous creatures. And yet, we know of the facts of the other side of that picture, of the atrocities committed by the new arrivals on this soil. And so, we see even those swept up in this war, all claiming victim, yet all bearing the marks of sin and hatred of fellow man. In all, we see the effects of sin upon people, of the destruction of the Imago Dei. Quote, "Oh, the doleful sight that was to behold at this house. Come behold the works of the Lord, what desolations he has made in the earth." Of 37 persons who were in this one house, none escaped either present death or bitter captivity, save only one, who might say as he, and I the only one who escaped alone to tell the news. Job 1:15. There were 12 killed, some shot, some stabbed with their spears, some knocked down with their hatchets. When we are in prosperity, oh, the little that we think of such dreadful sights, and to see our dear friends and relations lie bleeding, their heart blood upon the ground. It is a solemn sight to see so many Christians lying in their blood. Some here, some there, like a company of sheep torn by wolves, all of them stripped naked by a company of hellhounds, roaring and singing, ranting and insulting, as if they would have torn our very hearts out. Yet the Lord, by his almighty power, preserved a number of us from death. For there were 24 of us alive and carried captive. And yet, Mary seems to have caught something with her title. Because this moment in history is like all of history since Adam, marked by violence and sin and the destruction of fellow man. And yet, a history marked by the sovereignty of God, and one filled with his mercy and goodness. Quote, when I came to the brow of a hill and looked toward the swamp, I thought we had come to a great Indian town, though there were none but our own company. The Indians were as thick as trees. It seemed as if there had been 1,000 hatchets going at once. If one looked before one, there was nothing but Indians, and behind one, nothing but Indians. And so, on either hand, I myself in the midst, and no Christian soul near me. And yet, how hath the Lord preserved me in safety? Oh, the experience that I have had of the goodness of God to me and mine. This episode of the Semper Reformanda podcast was written and produced by me. Special thanks to Josh Koval for the music. Thanks. We'll see you next time.